Hi, Sparrow here. I'm back to share one more, and this will probably be the final video post about Mythic Warrior Weekend number 3. So, where I left off, in the last part, I had just talked about the men doing the Death Lodge with their father, and that finished out the afternoon. So, dinner followed, and then after dinner, we went down to the field where there was a fire pit, and we did a ritual called burning our inheritance. So we had a fire going in the fire pit, and by then the snowstorm had started. So all of the men stood in a close circle around the fire pit. And then there was a leader doing this guided meditation. So the men stood there feeling how it felt to be within their lives as their lives were. And then the leader asked the men to take one large step back. And as you took the step back, you were to step back into the world of your father. And so the men stepped back into the world of their father, and they were told to imagine his world at the time of his birth. Imagine his parents, his living situation, what was going on in the world at that time. Was there depression? Was there wars? Imagine his city, his town, the house he was in, and what it was like to grow up there. So the men tried to really step back and inhabit the world of their fathers. And they were asked, how was he nurtured or not? What was he told or taught about the job, about the responsibilities of being a man? To try and really take on, what did he learn about God, duty, his place in the world, what constituted success or a good life? The men tried to imagine what modes of expression were available or required or denied and unavailable to him. What did he learn about women, sex, marriage, and family, his role and hers? And they're asked to imagine whether he questioned or could even question the role and the place carved out for him. So after stepping back into Father's world and being in that world and trying to really bring it into their hearts and awareness, they were told to take one more step back into the world of their grandfathers and try and again take on and ask those same questions, imagining the world at the time of his birth, his parents, his living situation, what was going on in the world at that time. Most likely there was a depression or a war or something like that. And what was it like for him to grow up in that family, in that situation, in that time? How was, the question was, how was your grandfather nurtured or not? What was he told or taught about the job and the responsibilities of being a man? What did he learn about God and his duty and his place in the world? What constituted a good life, and what modes of expression were available or forbidden to him? And what did he learn about women and sex and family and what he was required to do, what he could do, and what he could not do? And then after really taking on the world of grandfather and trying to be grandfather in grandfather's world, they were asked to begin their journey back. And by doing that, again, it's kind of in the dark with glowing fire. They were asked to hold out their hands as if they were holding a bundle. And in that bundle was the sum total of attitudes, beliefs, and life situations that grandfather was given. And so they imagined holding that bundle of grandfather and his inheritance. And then they were asked to step forward one step back into their father's world. And then they were, imagine turning around, receiving that bundle as their father from their grandfather, and turning forward, and try to feel how it felt to their fathers to get that inheritance from their grandfathers. And so they stood there as their fathers, holding the bundle of the sum total of grandfather's world, and being present in the world they were in. And what part of did they receive from their grandfathers that they didn't want? What part did they receive that they did? And what new parts were added from the situation and attitudes of the time? Then after that, they were told to step forward and come back into their life as it was now, as the person they were now, and to receive that bundle from their grandfathers. That bundle from their fathers. And then, and holding it now, they're asked to feel the weight and the quality of everything that their fathers have passed on to them. And by then they were standing right next to the fire pit. And there were 2 pieces of wood lying on the ground in front of each man. And then holding that bundle, they were asked to pick up one piece of wood. And then one by one, each man would step forward, holding that one piece of wood as the part of that bundle, as the part of their inheritance in the world that they didn't want and would not carry forward. And so each man got to name that part they did not want to carry forward, and then offering it, each man would offer it to the fire to burn. And so everyone did that with the fire glowing in the center. And after that was done, each man then picked up the second piece of wood to represent what they received from their father in their father's world that they did want to carry on. And each man would also step forward and name those qualities and those commitments, and then offer them to the fire to be transformed into light, into warmth, into the fiery energy to bring those forward. And after all the men had done that, done their own offerings, witnessed and heard from all the other men, we closed the ritual. And it was very beautiful. First of all, it's beautiful being around in fire as the snow, it's dark and the snowflakes are whizzing by sideways. That was magical in itself. But also to have that experience of, it's very easy to name things about your father or about the past we didn't like. But we often do that from the perspective of now. We don't realize the difficulties and challenges that the people from our past have had to live with. And in some sense, the work that perhaps that our fathers did to not hand some of their grandfather's world onward to us. So it was very sweet and felt wonderful. And at that point, we were done for the night and headed into bed. We got the men up early in the morning before it was light, and they were brought into the big open space where we do our work. And they were brought in to do a blindfolded trance dance. So the men were told that they were going to, the blindfolds were passed out, and they were told that they would be blindfolded and that there would be music played, and that they would have the freedom to let whatever kind of movement wanted to come through them be expressed through them, to just let it come and to move in whatever way the movements wanted to be brought forth through them. And so, everybody spread out And they were told that we, the three facilitators, would keep them safe. They were free to make any kind of movements they wanted or that wanted to come through them, and that we would keep them safe. Well, let me just grab this. Well, this is a meditation cushion, obviously, but I'm just using it for example. Actually, what we had was big couch cushions, much bigger than this. So the three of us, through the 14 or so men were out there, would, as the men would move, if they were started moving horizontally and were about to bang into each other, we would just come over and like bumper cars, kind of. They were told when they felt the cushion, we'd either push them back into an open space, or sometimes we would just take these big cushions and put them in between men who were close together. So if they moved a lot and felt the cushion, they would draw back from it. So anyway, they just had this freedom. They were in the dark. They were blindfolded. There was no way they could look around the room and compare their movements to anyone else. So they just had this freedom to let whatever their body spoke be expressed through their body as movement. And it was, the dance went on really for almost an hour. And it started very gentle and incredibly energetic and driving in the center. And at times, some men were really flailing all over the place and very expressive. And some not much. And it was very interesting to see the amount of freedom different men had to follow their body, to let the unknown be expressed, and the difficulty some men had to get out of their heads. I mean, honestly, there was one man who really just stood with his arms crossed in front of him and moved. Virtually his only movement was tapping his foot. And other men had wild movements, and then they would just kind of go like this and collapse or sit on the floor, and until other things happened. So that was really great. And we, at the end, the trance music slowed down and actually ended with the Cat Stevens song "Morning Has Broken." We actually did a lot of work to time this so that when that song "Morning Has Broken" happened, it was timed to, the music set was timed, and we started. So when that song came on, the sun would be rising. Of course, we're still in the middle of a snowstorm, so if it in fact was rising, there was no way to tell. But we finished that ritual, and everyone felt really good and excited. Some people had really expressed themselves wildly, and it was really fascinating to see how the patterns and where men were drawn to in the room. Sometimes it seemed like people just knew, and out of 14 men in a big room, every man would be like in one corner. So anyway, we closed then, went in, made breakfast, did camp cleanup, and we came back for our two last rituals. And this really just one I want to tell you about. But we did an exercise called tough, tight, and tender. And pads of paper and pens were handed out to everybody, and the men were told to, on their pads, make 3 columns, and and each column at the top would be labeled tough, tight, or tender, and down the side they would list the name of every other man who was in Mythic Warrior. So it's easier just to show you this. So here you can see, here's an example of the pad, tough, tight, and tender. So, and then what they were to do was they would go look, I'm doing this backwards, look at the name of each man and then decide and put an X in whatever column or whatever, whether they considered their relationship with that man to be tough, to be tight, or to be tender. Now, tough, if they mark their, again, backwards here, uh, if they marked the relationship with that man as tough, it meant, oh, that somehow there was something in that relationship with that other man in the room that was difficult, that was, just, there was something that just felt hard about it, that there was always difficulty. So that would require a mark in the tough column. The center column was tight. Now, tight doesn't mean great, like, hey man, we're tight. No, tight means, well, it's not actually tough or difficult. There's just something, it's more like there's a tight suit or a tight pair of shoes. It may not be obviously difficult. There's just something there, maybe not even named, that might feel constricted, or there's just something that's a little bit off, but maybe it can't even be named. And then, of course, here we go. Tender. The tender column means, oh, the relationship felt good, warm, open-hearted, just easy and joyful. And as well as being able to, as just put it in the column, in some sense, this is like a continuum. You could put your mark. Yeah, it's not in tender, but it's just a little ways into tight, maybe just a little over the line, and whereas again down here it's very close to the line, and over here you see it's like right in the center. It's really tight. So after that, everyone made out a description, or a place where their relationship was with the other men in the room. We set up a time. We would do this thing. We would mill around for a while, and then the timer would go off, and you would immediately turn to the man closest to you. And again, the timer would be set 1 minute each. Each man had 1 minute. So first, one man would tell the other man in what category or where on the continuum he put him, and why. To be really honest, and yeah, we gave a lot of guidelines about making I statements to really own what was difficult and why. And so this proceeded, this kind of like random milling cocktail party. You mill around, you then have these 2-minute conversations with everyone in the room, and really get to say your truth. Each person gets to say his truth, and honestly about what was difficult or what felt tight and why. So it was both practice in being emotionally literate, practice in making I statements, practice in owning one's feeling. The tightness doesn't mean that person's doing anything. The tightness would speak to something in me that has difficulty in relationship to this man. So it was great practice in having potentially difficult conversations. And certainly when we first described this, there was this look in people's faces of, oh shit. But it turned out to be an incredibly connecting and bonding experience. And there's something also really fascinating about it that I just want to mention. So if I go around and have, let's say, 14 of these conversations, and by far the mass majority of men tell me they feel tight, feel like tender, and then there's a few that's tight, and for whatever reason, and we'll speak about that. Well, that's just information. It's about me and you and these patterns we have. But if I go through this process with 14 men, and let's say, and 10 of the men put me in tight, and they all say essentially the same thing, then I really have to look at and own what it is about me that keeps people away, that I do to keep people away, that people find really difficult. What is it about me that really doesn't work for other people? So that was our first, other than the blindfold stance, that was our next thing. And it really led to a feeling of great connection, of the feeling that we could be safe with each other, that we could trust each other and also talk about hard things and still feel connected and bonded together. And after that, we moved into our final council, which I hopefully probably have mentioned before. Our last thing is we sit in a large circle. We have a talking stick, and each person has one chance. We're about to leave and we can be over, but each person has a chance to say what he most wants to say from his heart, given that this will be the last time to talk with the group, probably for another month. So there we are. Mythic Warrior Weekend 3, Part 4. I hope you've enjoyed it, and blessings on you today, and be well.